The legacy of Sylvester is a complicated one because it is one of the best kept secrets of American history. His career also illustrates the hideous damage caused by bigotry and ignorance. Sylvester James Jr. was born September 6, 1947 in Los Angeles, California. His great aunt raised his mother due to the fact that his grandmother was unmarried and too sickly to care for her. In the late 1930s, his great aunt relocated the family to LA. Letha was largely raised there, and she met her first husband, Sylvester Sweet James, and they moved into a small cottage owned by Letha's parents. His mother was a devout Christian, and she regularly attended Palm Lane Church of God in Christ in South LA. That is where Sylvester had a particular interest in gospel music. Sylvester became a young gospel star, performing at churches and conventions across California. Sylvester's father left the family when he was very young. His parents divorced when he was still young, and his mother had 2 other children with 2 other men before she settled down and married his stepfather, Robert Hurt. The women at the church would always describe Sylvester as very feminine, and he was not rough like the other boys. Unfortunately, at the age of 8, he was SA'd by a man at the church, and at the time it was rumored to be the church organist, but Sylvester always maintained that this interaction was consensual. However, he was a child when the interaction had took place, and the assailant was an adult. Sylvester's mother, Letha, took him to the doctor, and the doctor told her that he was gay, and that wasn't something that she could accept because of her faith. Even though he was the victim, he was viewed as an outcast, and his news of his homosexual activity began to spread through the church congregation, and after that he began to feel unwelcome, and he stopped going to church at 13. At the age of 13, he left his mother and his stepfather's house because by that time his relationship with them had been strained. At age 15, he began frequenting local gay clubs and built up a group of friends from the local gay black community, eventually forming themselves into a group called the Discotheques. One of the women in the Discotheques was named Duchess, and Duchess was a trans woman and Sylvester's best friend, and she earned her money as a prostitute, and Sylvester refused to engage in that type of stuff. But the group held lavish house parties, sometimes at their friend Etta James's house, which they dressed up in female clothing and wigs and trying to outdo one another in appearances. Now, I usually don't spend too much on the early years of an artist when I do these series, but I have to note and mention that Sylvester's formative years were during the gay liberation era and the civil rights movement. And during his teenage years, not only did he live an openly gay lifestyle, but would often dress in full female attire. That was illegal in California, but Sylvester risked suffering severe consequences from police officers, or worse yet, from anti-gay vigilantes. And even through the storms of stratification and the fires of hate, Sylvester was unmoved. He became a radical visionary of music and identity and performance and authenticity. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and go to part 2. Sylvester finally graduated high school in 1969 at the age of 21. As I stated in part 1, he befriended Etta James and would regularly sing with her in the privacy of her own home. From black gospel to Billie Holiday to Etta James and Smokey Robinson, Sylvester had his influences, but like most great singers, Elvis Presley and Marvin Gaye and Ray Charles, his personality dominated every performance, making songs of any genre somehow his own. He sort of grew distant from the Discotheques and they broke up, and later Sylvester moved to San Francisco and joined the drag troupe The Cockettes. He explored his love for blues and jazz and even claimed on stage to be Billie Holiday's cousin, but the performance was so outrageous that crowds came to concerts more for the theatrics than the music. And it wasn't until Sylvester began to perform under his own name with his own band and with his close friends, backup singers Azora Rose and Martha Walsh, that he could try to truly present his musical gift. Sylvester made his debut album on the Blue Thumb label with Lights Out in 1971, followed by 1973's Sylvester and Bazaar. Sylvester and his band gained a regular weekend job at the Palms nightclub on Polk Street, and they performed 2 or 3 sets a night. It was through this show that Sylvester came to the attention of Motown producer Harvey Fuqua, and he signed Sylvester to Fantasy Records in 1977. In the middle of that year, he recorded recorded his third album, Sylvester, which featured a cover design depicting Sylvester in male attire. Sylvester's fame increased following the release of his solo album, and he was employed to perform regularly at the Elephant Walk Gay Bar in the Castro area, which is like the gay sector of San Francisco. And he actually became a really good friend of Harvey Milk, which is the first openly gay man to be elected to public office in California. Sylvester released his fourth album, Step 2, in September of 1978. The album included the gold record hits, Dance, Disco Heat, and his biggest record to date, You Make Me Feel Mighty Real. His collaborator James Weirick created a demo tape for the track. Originally, it was supposed to be a demo track, but once Sylvester heard it, he insisted on turning it into a disco record. He didn't necessarily see himself as a disco singer, but it was big at the time, and plenty of other soul vocalists had done well out of the genre. Now, his friend, session musician Patrick Cowley, who was sort of like a pioneer to early electronic music, was responsible for bringing in those synthesizers for his song, You Make Me Feel. The song was Sylvester's first top 10 hit in the United Kingdom, where it peaked at number 8 on the UK singles chart in October of 1978. And in the US, the single was his second top 40 hit, peaking at number 36 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in February of 1979. And it also peaked at number 1 on the Dance Club Songs chart. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and go to part 3. Sylvester was unapologetically Sylvester, even when it caused black radio stations not to play his music because of homophobia. To listen to Sylvester is to be in awe of his talent and to find yourself in a state of bewilderment over why he is not recognized as one of America's greatest singers. Musically, Sylvester is known for his powerful falsetto and for merging the gospel-inspired R&B strand of disco with the more thumping, mechanical-driven synth side of the genre. That is an innovation that paved the way for house and techno music. Sylvester was an openly gay musician at a time when almost no one in the music industry was openly gay. He was gender fluid in every visible and unapologetic way before terms like gender fluid, gender queer, or non-binary existed. And he was a person of color doing this all at a time when gay culture, particularly in San Francisco, was largely centered around whiteness, masculinity, and conformity. After his musical peak, the next few years would bring a massive upheaval for dance music and the LGBTQ community, as well as Sylvester personally. There was homophobic, racist backlash against disco, and major labels were dropping their disco artists. Sylvester's record label, Fantasy Records, always had a tense relationship with his sexuality and gender presentation. The label tried to shape Sylvester's image to be more masculine, like a Tendy Pendergrass style R&B singer, but Sylvester refused to be toned down. They parted ways in 1981, and Sylvester also split with his manager Harvey Fuqua, who had failed to pay him over $200,000 in royalties. Sylvester moved over to Megatone Records, which was a San Francisco-based gay disco indie label co-founded by his friend and collaborator Patrick Cowley. Though it was a step down in terms of mainstream influence, it would afford him greater creative freedom and accommodate his sexual orientation and gender identity. But just as Sylvester's career seemed back on track, Patrick became sick with a very mysterious illness, and in November of 1982, Patrick died of AIDS, and he was one of the first 1,000 patients to pass away from this disease. And at that time, very little was known about AIDS, and it wasn't even coined until July of 1982. And in June of 1982, the Center of Disease Control published a report hypothesizing that the illness might be caused by poppers, or that word, two drugs favored in the gay club scene. HIV hadn't been discovered, and there was no test or treatment for AIDS, and no celebrities had it. No advocacy group existed for the disease. Reagan refused to acknowledge its existence, and it was unknown whether the disease might be transmissible by toilet seats or mosquitoes or kissing or handshakes, all which was accumulated by a mass hysteria about AIDS that was often expressed by homophobia. If you made it this far, thank you so very much for watching, and go to part 4. In 1985, Sylvester's boyfriend, Rick Cranmer, became aware that he was infected with HIV, and his health deteriorated and he died on September 7th, 1987. He developed a persistent cough, and after pressuring him to go to the doctor, he was eventually diagnosed with AIDS, and he was hospitalized for sinus surgery in late 1987. During an interview with the Los Angeles Times, he said, "I can't walk very well anymore. I have problems with my feet and sometimes the pain is unbearable, but I don't like to take painkillers because of the side effects. I've been in situations I shouldn't have been. We all have, but I still think that I'm a good person and I don't regret anything I've done in my life." He also said, "Down the line, I hope I won't be in a lot more pain, but I don't dwell on that. I will be fine because my spirit is fine." It bothers me that AIDS is still thought of as a gay white male disease. The Black community is at the bottom of the line when it comes to getting information, even when we've been hit so hard by this disease. I'd like to think that by going public myself with this, I can give other people courage to face it. I've never been a crusader, but I've always been honest. I may not volunteer details to the media, but I never believed in lying or denying what I am to anyone. I don't believe that AIDS is the wrath of God. People have a tendency to blame everything on God. Having lost a lot of weight and unable to walk easily, he attended the Castro's 1988 Gay Freedom Parade in a wheelchair. Crowds chanted his name to such an extent that he was able to hear them from his bedroom. He continued to give interviews to the media, being open about the fact that he was dying of AIDS, and sought in particular to highlight the impact of the disease was having in the African American community. By Thanksgiving, he was increasingly bedridden and reliant on morphine, and he died in his bed on December 16, 1988 at the age of 41. His funeral took place at the Love Center, and his sermon was provided by Reverend Walter Hawkins, and he was dressed in a red kimono and placed in an open-top coffin for mourners to see. Now, Reverend Hawkins is a gospel legend, and he created the Love Center in Oakland as a way for people of all walks of life to come together and worship. They took that same attitude to Sylvester. His strangeness, even when it was noticed, was beloved. In an age when selling out has become so predictable that to utter the words makes the statement that follows those cliched and meaningless, and in an age when performers voluntarily reduce themselves to brands, Sylvester shows us how, against great odds, one can discover the most hidden treasure of the soul and present the greatest gift of the artist, humanity. Rest in peace to Sylvester James Jr. Thank you so very much for watching. I know I haven't been on in a long time, but work and school have been kicking my ass. Like, y'all don't even know. But nonetheless, you guys have stayed 10 toes down for me, and I appreciate you. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Thank you so much for 57K. That is insane. I've been working on a music project, and I am super duper excited. I'm doing a little bit of a rebrand on my page. I'm still going to do the stories and everything like that, but I just wanted to let you guys know that, so just in case my socials look a little wonky. But thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.